So I saw a tweet yesterday that really got me thinking. And I get it, this is not anything that actually happened, this is not news, this is not a rumor, this is just a conversation. Because it's July 17th, we've got nothing to talk about, there's nothing going on in the hockey world, and things like this are able to capture my attention. So let's go out there and read a tweet from Chester Meng. Yeah, you might know Chester Meng. He works at Stratton Oakmont. He's under Jordan Belfort, and he's trying to go out there and sell shares of Disney at you because he's got an offer on his desk that is perhaps the best thing he has seen in the past 6 months. If you've got a minute, he's going to tell you all about it. But Chester Meng went out there and tweeted this yesterday, and it got me thinking. So, Vasili Podkolzin over Matt Boldy is kind of turning into Juolevi over Tkachuk 2.0. Eh? Matthew Boldy has 171 career points already. Vasili Podkolzin has 35. I'm a fan of his, but I'm scared he'll never even hit 171 points in his entire NHL career now. So, this is a very interesting thought. I don't think we need any graphics. I don't think we need any extra numbers to break things down. We just gotta go off of memory, and we gotta go off of projections. Because when it comes to Vasili Podkolzin, the Vancouver Canucks' 10th overall pick in the 2019 NHL Draft, you might remember that when he was actually drafted, yeah, that's right, I was pretty shocked, to say the least. My facial expression on the Podkolzin draft video was like frozen in time. I was getting ready for the Canucks to draft Cole Caulfield. I wanted to see that guy don the blue and green in the draft in Vancouver. I was like, it's gotta be Caulfield. If it's not Caulfield, then it's gonna be Boldy. If it's not Boldy, then okay. If it's Soderstrom, the defenseman, that's okay too. But Vasili Podkolzin was not the guy that I thought the Vancouver Canucks would take, and my facial expression told the entire story. However, going back over to the idea of Podkolzin over Boldy being some sort of a Juolevi over Tkachuk situation, I'm just going to say at the beginning of the video that I don't think that is going to be the case. You see, when Vasili Podkolzin was drafted 10th overall by the Canucks in 2019, it actually was seen by some as a steal of a pick. Podkolzin, might you remember, was a player that at some point in the 2018-19 draft season was supposed to go somewhere in the top 3. He had a standout Ivan Hlinka-Gretzky tournament, and that performance was so spectacular that it shot him all the way up the draft rankings. If we go over to some of the videos, TSN in the summer of 2018, talking about the 2019 draft and the guys going to be taken near the top, there were conversations saying, yeah, Jack Hughes is going to be number 1, but number 2 could be Podkolzin, number 2 could be Philip Broberg. That was the entire sentiment at the beginning of the draft season. Capo Caco wasn't really that good yet, so he didn't really cement himself in that top 2 spot until like a few months into the year. Podkolzin was seen as this bulldog-like force who had immense goal-scoring potential and incredible leadership skills too. There were a lot of intangible qualities and hard-nosed qualities that made Podkolzin such a good player in the eyes of scouts in that 2018 summer. Notice I'm saying 2018 summer and not the 2018-19 season, because Podkolzin's Hlinka-Gretzky was so good that it put him near the very top of the draft rankings. However, as Podkolzin's career went on in Russia, as that season went on, heading into the 2019 draft, his production was nowhere near to be found, and it was nothing close to what he had accomplished at that Ivan Hlinka-Gretzky tournament, which took place, I believe it was in August of that season. So, Podkolzin started out that 2019 draft season super hot, but his production, or lack thereof, is part of the reason, if not the entire reason, why he slipped to the 10th overall spot with Vancouver. Not to mention the fact that there were some people, like Scouching, I remember was a big one on this talking point, who kind of questioned the offensive productivity of a guy like Podkolzin heading into the next few years. How the tournament was great, but the rest of his league play just was not up to snuff in the slightest. He wasn't scoring as many points or goals at all. And as Podkolzin's career continued in Russia, you saw a lot of that production slowly creep up, but never get to a point where you could compare Podkolzin to other Russian first-round picks of the past. You couldn't compare him to Tarasenko. You couldn't compare him to other guys that weren't even first-round talents. Nikita Kucherov, Nikita Gusev, Kirill Kaprizov, like, none of the Podkolzin KHL seasons had any point production that was near those guys. But the work ethic, the effort, the hard-nosed qualities, the bulldog, bulldozer, wrecking ball mentality was always going to be there. And it was why a lot of Canucks fans were still optimistic. Of course, this was a guy that was going to have himself an NHL role. He has the physicality, he has the frame, he has the work ethic and the intangibles. He plays a Rick Tocchet-style game. But the point production just wasn't there. The confidence wasn't there either. He wasn't really allowing himself to make great plays or try to create snipes on the rush. He can snipe it, but that was something that he didn't really allow himself to exhibit in the pro scene in North America. So heading into this upcoming season, Podkolzin is in a tough spot because he has pretty much a roster spot available to him if he's able to put in that work, but how far does hard work take you? That's ultimately the question here. As to the comparisons to Matt Boldy, you see, I personally would have had Matt Boldy over Podkolzin in that 2019 draft season. I had Caulfield over everybody else, but Matt Boldy has evolved so much beyond that draft ranking that he had that I think his explosion of point production is something that I think not only Canucks fans and Podkolzin fans should be wary of, but also a whole bunch of other players on top should be wary of as well. No shade to Dylan Cousins, but Matt Boldy is a better player. No shade to Trevor Zegras, but I'd say that Boldy is a more complete player. No shade especially to Philip Broberg, who was taken in the 8th overall spot in that year's draft. There were a lot of players that were taken above Matt Boldy, whom Matt Boldy is just better than right now. It's not just Podkolzin. So to think about Podkolzin over Matt Boldy being Juolevi over Tkachuk 2.0, I think that is a bit extreme. I do think that Juolevi was already seen as a questionable pick in the 5th overall spot in 2016. Matthew Tkachuk was seen by most people, I'd say, as the more likely pick to pan out. It was already kind of a head-scratcher when Juolevi was taken 5th, but for Podkolzin, I'd say that a lot of Canucks fans are like, oh, right, that guy's on the board, okay. They're taking that guy. He's not Caulfield, but he is a guy that was supposed to go high, so at least there's something behind that. For Olli Juolevi, I think a lot of Canucks fans from the moment the pick was made were already kind of wary, especially since after the draft in 2016, Matthew Tkachuk made the Flames, and he was really good. Like, he immediately made an impact with that squad, and it was already a big slap in the face. Hey, this Juolevi guy is not really producing as much, he's not really doing as much. Matthew Tkachuk is in the NHL, and he's torching the league already. Now he's a 100-point superstar, Stanley Cup champion, a guy who had back-to-back 100-point seasons with different teams, and he is what he is right now. Olli Juolevi absolutely turned into nothing for the Vancouver Canucks. Total bust of a draft pick. He didn't have the work ethic that you could say would allow him to carry on his NHL career with Vancouver. His conditioning wasn't good, and the skills that he did have just were not polished enough to make an impact at the NHL level for Vancouver at any point. He was just not good. And so Podkolzin, at the very least, has work ethic. He's got effort, and he has that dog in him to be able to continue to force himself into NHL positions and not look out of place in them. Sure, his confidence needs raising. Sure, his offensive productivity needs to be refined. But when it comes to pure hard effort, I'd say that he puts in enough effort to be an NHL player and at least contribute something, whilst the Juolevi comparison is a lot more dire and depressing because Juolevi just showed really nothing at all. Matt Boldy, on the other hand, hey, good on him for being as good as he has been, but I do think that he's not going to have that same Matthew Tkachuk-like impact like the Calgary Flames and Florida Panthers have seen over the past few years. If Boldy can be that good, then okay, great, prove me wrong, Matt Boldy, go out there and get yourself a 100-point campaign, but I do think he's more of a 70, 80-point guy with very good two-way and playmaking abilities, just an all-around Swiss Army knife-like winger for Minnesota, which is totally great, totally awesome, and unfortunately totally better than Podkolzin, but I do think that calling Podkolzin and Boldy, Juolevi, and Tkachuk 2.0 is a little bit extreme. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.